So these learning by doing costs are probably going to be the biggest ones. And so there's economies of scale just in terms of you don't have to pay these costs anymore once you get to a certain size. And so that's why there's that downward sloping portion of your long run average total cost curve. So a really great illustration of this comes from history. So in 1996, Verson, which is a firm in Chicago, introduced a stamping machine I know when I first read this, I was like, a stamp machine? Like, that makes a bunch of sense? No, it's for cars. So the stamping machine is the size of a house, weighing 12 locomotives. You never hear locomotive used anymore. Everybody just says train. So this is a $30 million machine. Get my keyboard off this thing. But it enabled automakers to produce in 5 minutes what it used to take 8 hours. So think of that productivity increase, right? But large output, you got to be a sizable firm, is necessary to achieve cost savings from the machine. So economies of scale, I mean, in a way, you know, that's been the like the mode du jour for the last 20 years, right? In terms of, you know, companies just, you know, if they take off, they get bigger and they purchase other companies and things become cheaper for them and they can create things at lower prices, right? I mean, like, you know, Walmart at this point, you know, is so large that it puts pressure on suppliers for their prices. So it's like a whole extra benefit to the economies of scale there in terms of they can like literally be like, well, if you don't lower the price of milk by 50 cents, we're just going to go somewhere else and spend $1 billion a month on milk or whatever it is that Walmart spends on milk, right? And so the person's like, okay, fine, you know, and so they use the fact that they're such a large consumer and such a large market share in their favor to reduce costs, right? That's their whole thing. So diseconomies of scale, a little bit more difficult to understand. So these occur if a firm becomes too large. So what do you mean by too large? So if there's a bunch of extra firms, right? So at first, you know, if there's like a small firm and there's 15 people, it's kind of hard to shirk when there's 15 people, right? In the factory or the firm or whatever it is, right? In the plant. But as soon as there's multiple plants and as soon as there's like 100-something people on the factory floor, now it's getting more difficult to make sure that everybody is on the task they're supposed to be doing when they're supposed to be doing it, right? And so that is part of it's becoming too large. So there's distant management. At first, you know, like the owner of the startup was there, you know, and he would go down on the production line sometimes, right? And he would help out when he needed helping out. And now, you know, it's like in some building in New York, right? And we never see that person. And there's a million vice presidents and people that work under the vice presidents, right? There's this huge middle management structure to try to manage all of these little firms, right? But that as a worker, that doesn't feel as good, right? And so that's the other part of it, which is worker alienation. So you just feel less and less like you matter, less and less like, you know, you're actually contributing to the final good and service or service. What are some other ones? Coordination problems. And then communication problems. You know, centralizing all of these decisions requires an immense amount of coordination and communication. And if any one of those links breaks down, then that could have some catastrophic outcome for the company, right? And the viability of the company. So the kind of technical definition of diseconomies of scale, right, is if a 10% increase in all resources used results in a less than 10%. So I'm just going to use 5%, but it could literally be 9.5%, right? It just has to be less than 10%. So a 5% increase in output. So to keep from experiencing diseconomies of scale, right, they may decentralize a lot of the decision making. They may try to utilize smaller production units that are more independent among themselves. But then they have to kind of figure out, well, how do we pay and reward, and, you know, what's the incentive schema with that, right? So it kind of, you know, you close one door, you kind of open a whole bag of worms. So when we put this all together, we end up with this concept of the minimum efficient scale. And so this is the scale. It's the smallest level of output. So it's how scaled up at which a firm can minimize long run average total costs. And so this uses figure 6.6a. So, you know, they kind of mess with you a little bit, because they're like, oh, here's the long run average total cost curve, and then they make another one that doesn't look kind of anything like it, right? And so this one is probably more representative of what's actually going on, where there's a period of economies of scale, there's a period of constant returns to scale, and then there's a period of diseconomies of scale. So when we're looking for the minimum efficient scale, we're really looking for that first amount of that first quantity that's associated with this lowest point, which, I mean, the lowest point is existing all along all of these quantities, right? Up until you get to this point where then it starts to go up. So there are some firms that are going to realize this Q at a smaller plant size. So let's brainstorm. What are some of the smaller plant size industries, right? So, you know, furniture. You know, you could make furniture in your backyard, or, I mean, if you wanted to, you could, like, it's not really expensive to get a professional furniture. Apparel. Food processing. They say snowboarding, but I don't know if they mean snowboards or snowboarding. But I'm going to say snowboards, because that makes more sense. Snowboarding is like a service. And it's actually really expensive to offer this service. So you have to have like rights to a mountain and stuff, right? It's like very expensive. Snowboards, though, like there have been some cases of like people like starting snowboard companies in their garage and stuff, like very successfully, right? What's it? Do you remember the company name? I can't remember. I think it's a Colorado company, but anyways. So larger plant sizes, right? So other industries right? They're going to have very large facilities to get to that Q, right? To get to that point, that minimum efficient scale. And so these are going to be automobiles, aluminum, that's how they say it in the South, aluminum, steel, and other kind of heavy industries. And several new information technology industries as well. Like if you tried to get into cloud computing now, right? Like if you tried to like be better than Amazon or Microsoft at hosting websites, you just like it's be so ridiculously expensive in order to be able to offer something that actually can compete, right? All right, so our last thing, applying our analysis, and then we'll finish off. And since you guys have your tests and your test covers 1 through 6, we'll just stop here for the day, and I'll let you guys go early. I'll get attendance though, so don't gotta get attendance. I always forget. So the book asks about this very interesting example between aircraft assembly and ready mixed concrete. So with aircraft assembly, there are extensive economies of scale. That's why there are only like 4 aircraft assembly, like aircraft producers in the world. Especially with large commercial aircraft. So there's actually only 2 firms in the world that manufacture large commercial aircraft, Boeing and Airbus. So Boeing, United States company, Airbus is a French company. Compare this to the concrete industry. Concrete industry exhausts the economies of scale rapidly. So as a result, there's thousands of firms in the industry. There's a difference in geographic scope as well, right? With the Boeing and Airbus aircrafts, right? These can be flown and delivered anywhere on Earth, right? Whereas the concrete, the ready-mix concrete, they can only serve a 50-mile radius before the concrete, starts to set. So there's many different reasons why some firms are going to, have small economies of scale. Some firms are going to have, small minimum efficient scales. Some firms are going to have large minimum efficient scales, right? So the minimum efficient scale for aircraft assembly is going to be many, many, many times more than the minimum efficient scale for something like ready-mix concrete, right? All right, so we'll finish off here today. So make sure to take your midterm by Monday at midnight, chapters 1 through 6. There's a couple of Learn Smarts as well to do before class on Tuesday. Grades should be mostly updated. And let's do attendance real quick. Let's stop this.